You're live.
Great. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Good to have you all. We're now shifting gears to another consumer protection bill. The H512, which is our ticket reseller bill. And we have, we have 2 weeks left. We're trying to come and get together, and we're trying to address concerns people have. And to that end, our Legislative Council has some new language for us to look at this morning and consider. And then we're going to hear from everybody else, but we just thought we'd start here. So, Cam Wood, well.
For the record, Cameron Woods, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'll walk through an amendment that I shared around earlier this morning with a few pieces of language that are highlighted for discussion.
Yeah, just put a minute. David, we're trying to see if we can get working towards getting to addressing some people's concerns and trying to keep this Vermont focused and Vermont focused, I don't use anything else. And so Cam has had some thoughts and has been working with others to kind of figure out how we can get there. And here we have, so Cam is going to address those. Great.
So amendment, it's draft 1.1. It's drafted as strike all amendments, depending on how you all want to move forward. We could narrow that down and potentially just do instances of amendments. So it just depends on ultimately what you all want to change.
Strike alls are very useful in that they all flow much more easily.
Right. You can see the entire language together in one package. So the first change is the definition of reseller. So this is the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. So it would be based on this language. It's reseller means a business entity whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets, or an individual engaged in the resale of more than 5 tickets in a 12-month period. And so if you all recall, this has kind of been a discussion point that you've been having over the past few weeks. The current bill is a person engaged in the resale of tickets. So it would include individuals in that instance who may be just buying a ticket for personal use. What this definition, this amendment kind of mirrors what was passed in Maine. So if you look at the legislation in Maine, it is a ticket reseller means a business entity whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets. So what this definition that I put in here is similar to what you have there. A business entity whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets. So a few things to think about there. It says a business entity. You could change that to just be person. The person would include both individuals and businesses, so registered business entities. Another thing to think about is this says whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets.
Right.
That may be something you want to look at, because you're kind of further limiting the application of the section. It would have to be a business entity, but not only a business entity, an entity that is primarily, the primary business is the sale or resale of tickets.
Right.
Those would be things that the Attorney General's office would have to look at if they were looking to take an enforcement action. They would have to demonstrate that it's a business entity, but it's also a business entity whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets.
Right.
So
one concern I know we had is that in this market, we've heard testimony that in the bots that there are that they're bots that are showing up as individuals buying blocks of tickets, or like up to 10 tickets, and then doing exactly the thing that's scamming and hurting our Vermont consumers. Remember, this is a consumer protection bill. We're here to protect Vermont consumers, and that one of the ways consumers are harmed is that bots posing as individuals are able to be effective in this market. Bots are taken care of elsewhere, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. There's already a statutory section in Title IX. I was just pulling it up real quick so I could share it with you. And thank you to the Attorney General's office for pointing this out. So a person shall not intentionally use a computer program or other software intended to interfere with or circumvent on a ticket seller's website an equitable ticket buying process established by the seller for tickets of admission to a sporting event, theater, performance, or place of public entertainment or amusement of any kind. You know, you could potentially tweak that language if you felt that it needed to be perfectly fine, but I think what you have here is a prohibition on the use of some sort of software intended to, you know, circumvent some sort of limitation on the resale of tickets. And the office already has this in statute, and it already has kind of enforcement.
But
The civil actions can be brought from
And-
the venue against somebody who's using bot in that situation.
and from the vast amount of testimony we had, my understanding is that sadly that may be happening and not being caught. Is that, Thomas, do you have a thought on this?
I do. So thank you for synchronizing to some extent with the main approach. The other piece of the main approach that I see parts of, but not necessarily in here, and it does come to consumer protection, protecting consumers' rights. What I like about the main law, if you're looking at it right now, passed it to CAM, is it defines the ticket reseller, and the prohibitions explicitly apply to the ticket resellers and not to individuals. So they don't necessarily define individuals. So from a consumer advocacy perspective, I really like what May did. It's really applying regulations to those that are engaged in the business of reselling. So that's something that I would still want to continue to advocate for. I do think this is moving in a better direction. So thank you for all this effort, Cam. But I just think an important distinction is there are still some prohibitions in here that I think are applicable to individuals, however you want to define that. And I like the main approach where they just explicitly carve out who this applies to, and then the prohibitions are only to them. So that's the difference I'm still seeing.
So what I would
Can you
say
address
is,
that? That's
well, so reseller here, business entity whose primary business is the sale or resale of tickets, or an individual engaged in the resale of more than 5 tickets in a 12-month period. So the only prohibitions here would apply to a reseller. And in that event, it would have to be an individual engaging in the resale of more than 5 tickets. So if you just have one, then as I kind of drafted this up, it wouldn't apply to that individual. Because when you look at the prohibitions, right, you have a notice requirement, but the notice requirements are really primarily directed at the secondary ticket exchange, not necessarily a reseller. And then when you get to the price cap would be on a reseller. So the reseller would have to meet that definition. And then similarly, you have the ban on deceptive URLs. One thing I wanted to mention down here on the prohibition on speculative tickets, that would, again, it would only apply to a reseller. If you're going to amend the definition of reseller to only apply, you know, have the definition be a business entity or an individual selling more than 5 tickets, you may want to change this because, you know, again, you're kind of narrowing the application of the section. And if you're wanting to have an outright ban on speculative tickets, you may want to change that to say a person shall not sell or offer for sale speculative tickets. And then that would apply to any individual, wouldn't apply to just a reseller. So keep that in mind as you're.
You mean under 5?
Under E right here. I'm looking at the prohibition on speculative tickets.
Just to crystallize my point, I would just say enforceability, but maybe Attorney General's is in here. How is anybody going to track whether or not a person, individual has sold more than 5 tickets? And so that's maybe why the main really took a
Yes.
different approach.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Senator, because that was something that you all may want to take into consideration. The individual engaged in resale of more than 5 tickets was another recommendation. It's obviously not in Maine, so they're both highlighted and just points for consideration for you all. Who do you want the section to apply to? You can make it apply to as past the house. It would apply to anyone, including individuals. If you go more with the language that was drafted in Maine, it would apply to entities that are primarily engaged in reselling of tickets. So the question is just really, where would you all like to draw that line?
So I, I think, well, the key thing for me, I mean, once an individual is engaged in selling, I mean, what we're trying to make provision for are individuals who just have things happen, you know, so that they can't use a ticket. We're not, once a person is involved in creating it as a business, that's it, that they then become a ticket reseller. I mean, and the question is, where do we draw that line and above how many, and then how do we enforce it? I think those are all the questions that follow.
Another, not to add more confusion, that's not my intent. I want to raise for you the amendment that was proposed on the House floor by Representative Donahue, who was trying to address a similar concern. And I worked with her to draft this language, which would be an amendment to the definition of reseller. So it's a person engaged. You're still talking about persons. But
But person are businesses also, right?
they would be businesses and humans and individuals. So a person engaged in the resale of tickets, except that a reseller does not include an individual reselling a ticket purchased for personal use for a single event. So that's just another.
Talking too much, and I really would love to hear more thoughts of other committee members on this. But I just want to say, I too am centered around consumer rights. And so that's what I just will go back to. The main approach is they're really restricting commercial activity in the resale space while preserving individual consumer rights over their personal property benefit tickets. That's where I'd love to hear other thoughts.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I like the language that just popped up. Was that drop language?
That was like.
It was an amendment that was offered on the floor.
But obviously rejected.
Yes.
Got it. The five or less thing, B is kind of arbitrary. You know,
And it's hard to enforce.
Again, the comment about it being arbitrary, five, or not seven, not 10.
family of six. So
Right.
they're out. Yeah.
Right, no, I hear you. Can we look at Anne's language again? Or we could just take this. piece.
I'm sorry, this is the language that was proposed by Representative Donahue.
Okay, you can just read it again.
Yep, it's a person, so reseller means a person engaged in the resale of tickets, except that a
And
reseller
a person meaning the business, including business.
it would include
Right.
business, yep, but it would also include individuals. So a person engaged in the resale of tickets, except a reseller does not include an individual reselling a ticket purchased for personal use for a single event. So this is a point, I know, we're at 11:05, I know you got a few other witnesses, so I'm gonna jump back to
Just
the
keep
amendment
going.
that I have. Yep,
Yeah.
because there's a few other things I want to point out that are amendments here, so. I've also amended the definition of ticket to narrow it to say that we're talking about a place of entertainment within the state. So there was discussion last time about, well, what if I'm selling tickets to a venue that's not in the state of Vermont?
This
And
would not
I
include
mentioned
that.
that it would cover those if it was happening in the state as it came over from the House. And so what this amendment would do is to narrow the definition of ticket. So it would only apply to tickets to venues that are within the state of Vermont. So if you're selling a ticket, even if it's in the state of Vermont, you're selling a ticket to some sort of venue outside of the state, entertainment venue in Boston, then it wouldn't apply because the definition of ticket would not encompass those.
Right. Okay, Thomas.
Relatedly, non-Vermonters, Bostonians, with tickets to someplace up in Vermont, does this apply to?
That's a nice question. I'm not sure we can.
Over the sale takes place.
Well, not that we can control it or affect it, but the language is a little ambiguous.
But, Thomas is right.
So what I would say is it's going to depend on the facts of the circumstance. If the person is physically in Vermont when they're doing that sale, then yes, the state law would apply to. If they're doing it over the internet and the individual is selling the ticket online, if the person purchasing the ticket is not in Vermont, then I don't think Vermont law is going to be applicable. If the person purchasing the ticket is in Vermont and you have a seller who is out of state, then you know, I will somewhat have to defer the question to the AG of whether they would feel that they would have, you know, jurisdiction to go after the person outside the state. The transaction is occurring over the internet and the person purchasing it is in Vermont. Has the seller kind of, you know, availed themselves to the market in Vermont? I think an argument could be made, yes. I think the individual defendant is probably going to make an argument that they haven't subjected themselves to personal jurisdiction in the state because they're simply selling something through StubHub, right? They don't know where the person's located. So I think it would be harder to go after somebody who is out of state, who is selling one ticket over the internet to a venue in Vermont. I think it would be difficult to go after that person.
I think our real objective, at least initially, and we also, as we'll see, look further in the bill, we have a sunset, so we can review this in 2 years, see how it's working. And could address this conceivably and track it. I mean, I think our primary objective is to protect Vermont venues and Vermont consumers. So,
I'm just questioning if it will do that.
well, I would hope it would. Otherwise, we leave the door open and limit our Vermont consumers who may want to resell a ticket to the Red Sox game. It limits their ability to resell it at a certain price. So I'm trying. I think we're trying, and maybe we can find a better solution there. But I think we're trying to protect that ability to do that.
And for those just tuning in on YouTube, I just want to restate 90% of this bill is absolutely great. It's what we need to do.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. What we're really talking about here is the enforceability of the price cap, where that would actually apply. And so
Right.
if Don Delos sits down in a few minutes here and said that we can't stop people from out of the state from overselling for tickets and venues in Vermont, then I have a lot of even more questions about the validity of this approach.
Okay.
Why don't
so-
you keep going?
Moving to page 3, I've just highlighted the price caps here. If they're at 110%, this is as the bill that passed the House and came over. There's been discussion about raising it. So I'm just highlighting it
Yeah,
here.
I
So
think for the
you all
moment, we're
are
gonna keep it.
aware of where those caps
Right.
exist and where they would potentially need to be addressed if you want to make an amendment. The sub 3 here, I made a slight adjustment. The subsection shall not apply to the resale of a ticket under a written contract with a ticket issuer. As it came over from the House, I think it shall not apply to the resale of a ticket where the reseller has a written contract with the ticket issuer, and that's probably unlikely to happen. It's more of a technical fix than
Okay.
a substantive.
But that doesn't limit the relationship that UVM has with its reseller,
Yeah,
which is
the
yeah.
point of this subdivision was there are certain venues that have contracts with third-party platforms to authorize the resale of tickets. And they may have a contract that limits the price of the resale on that platform to 120% as opposed to 110%. And so this exclusion would allow that to occur. The question is,
Where's the exclusion for?
it's right, the subsection shall not apply. So this is the price cap, ticket reseller. Yep. And so, the way the language came over from the House was subsection shall not apply to the resale of a ticket if the reseller has a written contract with the ticket issuer. It's unlikely that the individual human who's reselling the ticket has a contract with the
Yeah.
original
I
vendor,
mean-
so this fixes that.
okay, right.
And then the last piece, I mentioned this, highlighting the word reseller for speculative tickets. If you're going to alter the definition of reseller to include just business entities, you may want to, address this unless you're wanting that prohibition to only apply to those entities. And then lastly, there's a repeal in July 1 of 2028.
Right, which I think that it was helpful to hear what, all the things that Maine has learned, even just in 1 year. It struck me that as I know that this was an issue for some members, that we be able to look at it in 2 years makes a lot of sense. Look at better data. So
I was gonna say, circling back to the applicability here, you narrowed it, so it's just venues in the state. And as I mentioned earlier, if the transactions are occurring within the state, it's clear that the state has jurisdiction over those enforcement against individuals. If it's an out of state, it's really going to depend on, I would argue it's going to depend on the facts of the case. Is it an individual who's consistently buying tickets and selling them to individuals in Vermont at price greater than 110%? Let's assume the cap is in place. And I think the AG's office has a much better argument that they have jurisdiction over that person. That they're continuing to avail themselves of the market in Vermont and selling to individuals here in Vermont. And they are raising the cap above what you put in statute. So I think you're going to have a much better argument that the state has jurisdiction to bring that individual into court and to enforce compliance with our law. If it's a one-off, much difficult, much more difficult.
There's one more question if you have.
Of course, Ken.
So, thank you for all this, and I definitely support what Maine did. We have testimony from both the Arts Council here in Vermont as well as the others that what Maine did works. And so I keep going back to the Maine language, a variety of fronts. I also recall in hallway conversations with UPM, I am under the impression that if Vermont moves forward with this price cap of 110%, that we would be the only state in the nation with a broad price cap across all tickets to all venues. Could you give an idea of what your research came up with about how normal or commonplace this is?
Yeah, two things. Before I get to that, one other comment is the Maine, legislation. When you look at the Maine law, it is, at least as I read the language, it is addressing fees associated with the price of a ticket. So there's a question about, I know that you've heard testimony, and there's a question about the applicability of the Maine statute. So that's another piece that I didn't address in this amendment. You all may want to discuss. When it comes to what have other states done, I've done quite a bit of research on this, trying to find other state statutes. Most of them don't have a cap. The vast majority of them do not have any sort of cap on a resale. Some of them have a cap, but they have very clear exclusions or very clear unless conditions are met. So there are some states that say you can't resell a ticket for more than a few dollars or more than 10% above the price unless you're selling it over the internet, or unless you're selling it through a platform that offers a full refund of the ticket if the event is canceled, for example, or something. There's a few standard provisions that some of these states have implemented. If canceled or the person is not allowed admission to the venue, etc. So if there's a clear refund policy or requirement in place, then you can sell above whatever the cap is that state's put into place. There's a few states that have that. There are 3 states that I found that I think that 2 of them have just a blanket cap, and it's Rhode Island and Kentucky. Rhode Island's is $3 or 10%, whichever is greater. And I can't remember, I didn't write anything down on Kentucky. I believe Kentucky just has an outright ban on selling tickets above the price of the ticket. And then I also found in North Carolina has a cap of $3. It can be more than that if you have agreement from the operator of the venue. There is an exception in North Carolina, similar to what I've mentioned in other states. The cap doesn't apply if the sale is on the internet and there are certain conditions that are met. But one thing that was different that I found in North Carolina was that the venue has to agree to the resale. So if the venue itself prohibits the resale for greater than the original cap, then the kind of exception of you being allowed to do it through the internet wouldn't apply. So a few different options you could move forward with, but those are, I would say, 2 states that have just a cap without some sort of condition of being able to sell through the internet if refunds are offered, etc. Most states do not have it.
Rhode Island has the exception over the internet.
Rhode Island does not. No, sir. Rhode Island was $3 or 10%. And I was not able to find any sort of exception in the Rhode Island statutes.
In North Carolina, it's a cap of $3.
I'll send it statutory section. Yep. I did not do an examination of what bills have been proposed.
Yeah,
I know there are many bills that have been proposed, and a lot of the states that don't have a cap and some of the states that do, et cetera. I did not do an exhaustive research on that. I've just been trying to look at what statutes are current.
When we get to testimony, I'd be curious. My business experience is coming out of aerospace and defense. The mantra was, we'll cut your grass if the profit margin is right. Meaning we'll do anything if the profit margin's right. Okay. Is 10% sufficient? You know, does 10% kind of kill this whole initiative of reset? Anyway, that's what I'd like to hear.
No, we've heard it. I mean, we heard from Europe, we've heard from England, we've heard from, we've heard that it's not, like 10% is a lot. You know, some of us would be very happy to do 10%.
That's right. So while this is a great bill.
Right.
You know, is 10% still a sufficient profit to motivate people to resell? Because they're gonna get 10%.
Well,
Pretty good. That's pretty good return.
we're gonna hear from some of that stuff.
On scale, yeah, exactly. I
On
mean,
scale.
it harms the individual consumer.
I get that. No, I
Well,
get that.
no, that's what I'm saying. I think I'm agreeing with you. I think it could have unintended consequences to put a cap on. I think a lot of other states, or I hope what I'd like to know is if we're looking at the things that we think are bad practices and making sure those are outlawed. I think that would be better.
There's a lot of that, which is great.
Okay,
So
so,
one other thing I'll just mention on that, and my apologies for digressing, if you feel it's, there are states that have a cap if you're within a certain distance from the venue. So like your historical scalping, there are some states that say you can't sell it for greater than face value if you're within 200 feet of the venue. I think I saw 150 feet of the venue. So there are some states that have that, but you know, no cap,
But
no
that
discussion.
still, I think it's the little guy who,
Well-
there might be somebody who's literally going because they can't sell it anywhere else, and they're like, you know.
the testimony we've heard is that the cap provides enough, benefit to the people reselling and protects our consumers. So I think that we're trying to find a path that both protects our consumers and provides profit for those who are in this business legitimately and doing a good job and benefiting some of our venues as well. So, I would love to address Thomas's, and maybe Todd can do that in Todd's discussion next, but I think we have to further tweak this name, reseller language. So, Pam, you're gonna stay with us.
Yes, ma'am.
Todd, we're gonna move to you if we could,
Thank
and then we'll move to Susan, and then we could go from Brian and then Susan.
Good morning. For the record, Delos, Assistant Attorney General, thanks for having me in. I think it's the first time I'm talking about H 512. Had a lot of testimony upstairs in the house on this, so I'll be very quick at the top, and then I'm happy to answer the questions that came up and talk a little bit about the language that's in draft 1.1 that Cameron just walked through. From a policy standpoint, the Attorney General's office supports this. There's a lot of language in this bill that attacks some of the most significant fraud problems we see in this space. The bill addresses clear disclosures to consumers, does some clarification around spoof websites, spoof tickets and things like that. We really support all of that. Those are the kind of complaints we get. Candidly, those are areas where we believe we already have jurisdiction to prosecute, but this helps. No question. The issue of price caps and the like, I think you've heard the arguments from the venues and the Vermonters and the Arts Council. Those are policy questions, obviously, for this committee to determine. I'm happy to share where we look at what is most enforceable, what's most useful from an enforcement perspective, and then some other thoughts on just where this language sits right now. Certainly we'll answer the question around personal jurisdiction and enforcement for folks who are outside the state.
Yes, great.
So I would just flag that the version that passed the House that you were looking at originally is a much easier version of the bill for us to enforce, right? It says not that people can't resell tickets. Anybody can resell tickets as long as they possess the tickets. It just limits how much they can resell the tickets for. So that incident of the babysitter fell through, I can't make it to the Champlain Valley Fairgrounds to see whatever. I can sell that ticket. I just can't sell it for more than 10% of what I paid. Just want to clarify that. When we move to the main language, and I understand completely the desire to figure out, how do we not prevent people from reselling tickets if they're just doing it incidentally? How do we really go after the commercial bad actors? One challenge I see in the main language, and I have to say, I haven't had the opportunity to talk to folks in the Maine AG's office. That may be helpful. But I will tell you what I think our experience will be. When you use a term like, if the policy decision is to go from a person, which could be an individual or a business entity, to just a business entity, and then you further qualify that business entity as being primarily engaged in the sales, right? My brain goes to manage. Right, you're talking now about some kind of fraction where we need to look at what your total profits are, and then we're going to put the amount of money made off of the ticket sales. We're going to have to figure out what that ratio looks like, and then this is primary, not primary. It gets a little squishy. I don't actually know why Maine included that language, because I think if a business is in the business of selling tickets at all, arguably that's not capping their return on that would seem to be rational logical. I can imagine, again, pure speculation on my part, no pun intended. It could be box seats that a corporate entity owns I don't think we have any corporate entities that own green box seats, but perhaps that would be an area where, they're not able to fill the box that night, they want to sell it, that's fine. I would just suggest a 10% profit on that for a business that has other income streams.
It's not
That might be appropriate. So I would just suggest that primarily, if you want to go in the business direction, maybe not qualifying it that much further. To your questions about enforceability, it will be challenging. There's no question that when there are exemptions to the price cap application, we get into investigations that are going to take long work. I think largely our consumer protection work, and I haven't talked a ton about it to this committee, but I think you are all well aware, is complaint driven, right? We work with CAF at the partnership with UVM, Consumer Assistance Program. We take complaints from individuals all the time in the state, and we work with other states around bigger issues germane to this. As I think you all know, Vermont was part of the coalition state that just recently won a jury verdict against Live Nation and Ticketmaster
Yes.
in the monopolistic behavior they were engaged in around owning venues and around really controlling what artists do and how much tickets are sold for. And I think that's probably, you're going to hear more about that. We're still in the middle of that case, but the verdict has come in, and now we're going to work on where that case goes in terms of remedies. Putting that to one side, as we look at this, we're going to take those complaints, and then we will have to determine when we engage, what businesses we go after if this language were to pass. The individual language, I think Cameron already said this, but if you just change the language to person and then limited it to 5 or 10 tickets, that's the kind of thing where if we got a complaint, if I may, Dave Weeks is, somebody said he's selling tickets all over the place, and we send Dave a civil investigative demand and say, Senator, how many tickets are you selling? He says, I've only sold 7 this year. 5. And we would then, close the investigation. I should just say broadly, we almost never go after individuals. We're going after folks where there's a real pattern in practice. We're going after the bad actors. So I think I said this upstairs as well. The one-off selling a ticket on Front Porch Forum, we're happy. We're just not going to spend state resources going after those individuals in any event, regardless of how this language goes, unless it's a real egregious kind of behavior. So that's around the definitional term. Jurisdiction.
So your recommendation is to go instead to business entity to person and get rid of the individual with 5 tickets.
My recommendation, again, I think it's totally a policy question for this committee. I think I would just say from an enforcement perspective, person is the easiest. If it's business, I would just suggest getting rid of the primary business qualifier, because I think that'll be tricky.
Yes, right.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree. So I think the primary is a bit of a qualifier that could be easy to work around in a variety of different terms. That is what Maine had, but I'd be supportive of just another clarification that if it is a business entity, a non-person, that they should be applicable. I heard you say as passed by the House would be easier to enforce, but I interpret them as having the same enforceability and applicability concerns. And well, just before I finish, my bigger concern is clarity for our consumers.
Sure.
So my concern with the as passed by House, there's going to be an impression that this will stop all markups on all tickets everywhere, and that's just not the case.
That's
So, and I still want clarity though. Do you, as much as you think it'd be difficult, is it possible with interstate jurisdiction for you to prosecute somebody in another state selling tickets for a show in Vermont at a higher price?
yes.
You have that legal authority.
They are availing themselves of Vermont, right? Okay. They're selling a thing that's happening in Vermont. Person's buying a thing that's happening in Vermont. They're basing that on Vermont law.
Precedent for that, you feel completely comfortable. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
The situation I hear about the most is straight fraud. Like somebody thinks they're buying a ticket on social media, or they see a picture of the ticket and that makes it feel real to them, and they get nothing. Do you all do anything about those? Because I do worry that we'll see more of those.
So we definitely get complaints about that. As I said at the top, we also get complaints about the fake website that's like Flynn Vermont Chicks.
Right.
And we do work on those, right, to shut those down, send takedown notices and things like that. The one-off, purchasing a fake ticket is much harder for us to do because it's really an individual.
you need a pattern.
We're really looking at who are the bad actors who are consistently doing it. I think Maine's experience.
But if you investigate it, I mean, they seem to be a bit of an organized operation. Like I don't know.
To the extent that we're able to draw patterns, we would work on it. But I
Okay.
think one of the challenges here is, and this is a market that I hear from our investigators. I have not looked into this personally, but I think it's really hard. It's not going to be Todd Delos selling one and T Delos selling another. And
Yeah.
Todd
But I guess
selling
that's
third.
kind of my concern is like where people need the most protection, they have none.
I hear that. I think what this bill, as I understand Maine's experience to be,
Yeah.
is that it largely closes the markets that are most likely for people to engage in, or doesn't close them. It narrows
It
the window
narrows
of who can sell.
Right.
And I think what this bill does currently is provide a lot more consumer information on a reseller's site. So that
Right.
the resellers have to say who they are, the resellers have to say it's a resale ticket, the resellers have to clarify how many tickets or what percentage of tickets.
Right.
It's giving consumers information because we think that's the best way to protect them.
Right.
I would say the other piece,
I will say though, just CAP doesn't do anything with these folks because most of them think they're paying face value for a ticket.
Well-
So are you looking just for a markup, or are you looking for, the like Facebook Marketplace sales of tickets?
so
Because you said we're not looking at that, and I think that's going to proliferate, not from Porch Forum, that would be not in their character, but I think we're going to see more people looking for something that's too good to be true through Facebook Marketplace and Twitter, which is where I've seen the most harm done.
So I think what was, and now I'm gonna forget which drafts and when. At one point, there was a draft that had a public education campaign partnership between the AG's office, and I think the Arts Council as well. I think we hold that. Susan can probably speak to this because she'll remember better than I. Because we're happy to do it anyway. With those cases, Senator, where it is a one-to-one, it's much harder with our limited resources to go after one case for one individual.
Right.
Especially when the other entity is not going to be a reputable business. Where
Right.
CAP is most effective is when there's some kind of disagreement between a consumer and a reputable business, and CAP is able to step in and mediate because the business has a committed interest in helping satisfy customers. Where it's a fraudster,
Just
who
the-
maybe oversees.
but Does them using those social media websites make a difference? I mean, does it make a difference to, like, how do we I'm worried that we're gonna see more of that. And would you do a campaign that says like, don't use Cash App or Venmo to do any financial transaction? You know, like, I think we're gonna see a lot of informal fraud happen.
I think that's a really good flag. And I would say, yes, we're happy to include that in any kind of public education campaign. But I also want to be clear, that is a hole where the state entity that is the AG's office doesn't reach down into the one to general, doesn't reach down into the one to one.
So there is a piece though that Keisha brings up and we have talked about, which is requiring that Vermont tickets have the original price on them. I think that that is not a difficult thing to ask online or in person. You know, I'm getting very excited about just going up to the box office and buying the damn ticket rather than doing anything online. But I think that if we require that Vermont venues put the price on the ticket, that would help a lot and go to a little bit of what
I guess the reason
I'm thinking
the person I know very well lost a lot of money was because she saw a picture of a ticket.
Yeah.
And that ticket was never going to be for sale. And so I do get nervous about informal fraud and how little we'd be doing
right. Well, we're
about that, because we in DLL, right, we have investigation into tobacco or vape sales or anything like that. No matter how dark the corner of the internet is, you know, they're not going to be reputable businesses who try to take advantage of people. And we're going to have to make sure that's a huge part of the conversation, because we're going to be seeing more people looking for a deal that is too good to be true and doesn't even yield a ticket and has nothing to do with price cap.
I agree.
Yeah.
So the jurisdiction piece, again, we feel comfortable with that. The only other point I wanted to flag in the edit, and I think Cameron also addressed this, is the addition of reseller to the prohibition on speculative tickets. We haven't had a lot of, that's why I don't think this committee's for a lot on speculative tickets, right? But this is the sort of.
for some.
Okay. So I would just recommend there that it's just the prohibition on speculative tickets, that it's not limited to resellers, because I don't think they're kind of like a person.
So let's just
You don't
get rid
think
of
you can't say-
qualifier and just prohibit speculative tickets.
I'll sell you that bow tie, $50.
This.
Yeah.
So let's just, did you hear that, Evan? Okay.
It's so weird.
It's so great. We love bow tie. It just means you never get soup on it.
That and my children are tiny, like, used to put their hands all. When my kids were
I'm very
toddlers,
cool with
their
that.
dirty little hands would get all over, and that's when I was like, let's get it out.
I know, let's just get it up and exactly. Anything else for Todd? We have Todd that we can refer to again, right? Because we have people who are.
Thank you all very much.
Great,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Right, we're going to welcome you back. Thank you.
Again,
Todd, thank you. And wonderful. Right.
Thank you for your time. For the record, just a reminder, I was just here a few weeks ago. I'm Brian Barry, Executive Director of the Ticket Policy Forum, which is a coalition of leading online marketplaces in the United States. So we have stuff up seeking seats, ticket game time, and events ticket center. We are the opposite of what the AG's office just explaining about hiding in the corners of the internet.
Yes,
We're
we're
the-
very out there.
We are the
we
26
appreciate
years out there hiding in plain sight. We are so proud that we took risk and fraud off the street corners. What used to be a big gamble is no longer. We serve tens of millions, so 100 million customers every year throughout the states. We've worked in all 50 states, so happy to take any questions across the states as well. There were some.
They'll be phoning in.
There were some other states that were missed previously, Wisconsin, Washington, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Tennessee, West Virginia, Hawaii, Kansas. All this session looked at price caps, decided to not do vote. And we should talk a little bit about that as well.
Maryland, you forgot Maryland.
And Maryland also was on that list that did not pass. And so the list goes on there.
Which doesn't mean just because, but they haven't, there are a few that have, so I mean, yes.
But before you move on, I do want to hear your whole testimony, any responses to Rhode Island, Kentucky, and.
These are laws that have been on the book for a very long time. Tickets have been resold for Shakespeare. They've just been one of those items that have been bought and resold since the days of Shakespeare. Those laws have not been enforced. AG by AG, we just heard your office explaining the difficulty. That I actually appreciated sitting there hearing the candor about the difficulty in enforcing this. I think that's important for the committee to hear. So those laws have not been enforced. We haven't seen a new kind of approach to price capping. I'll call it total price capping, until we saw Maine. That's been in force for 7 months. You've heard a lot about the success of Maine. I've either tuned in or been
And
here.
Europe, and England, and Australia.
That's right, but I think Maine's success, we should just pause and realize that the success of Maine so far, that the Maine venue last week shared, the Arts Council has talked about, that your local vendors have talked about, that success is not built on a price cap. It's built on a lot of other really good things. But today, and I did this last night when I got in, I checked a bunch of events throughout Maine, and you will see prices, the full spectrum of prices. You'll see prices at 5x the original cost. You'll see prices that are probably closer to the original cost. The AG has made clear that they look at this as a fee to help contain the total cost of price of tickets, so that you don't have a surprise at the end of that experience online and suddenly your tickets doubled in price. That used to happen. It doesn't happen like that as a result of the total all-in price, the rule that took effect last May. That's the FTC. But Maine, if we were to discuss Maine, does several really good things that we think are, models for this committee to look at. The spec ban is one of them.
Yes, I think we've just made a decision.
I think you did. I think you did. And there's prohibition on certain marketing practices. The House committee here added to that portion in 512 in a good way, which will eliminate any type of misleading or potentially confusing notices about inventory left. Only 3 tickets available. Is that the whole world, or is that just on this particular page? We think that is a step in the right direction as well. But it's the price cap. We've heard, in fact, I think last week that what I heard was consumer trust has been restored. Complaints have fallen in the state of Maine, and more actual fans are getting the tickets in their hands at their actual price. Those are all, rainbow sunshine outcomes. We like those outcomes too. None have been delivered as a result of a price cap. I would argue that there's could be tremendous success with this bill passed without the cap. Senator Rand Hinsdale was asking some good questions about what happens, to the aggrieved customer who might have a fake ticket. The AG's office just testified and said the complaints they receive are about fake tickets, spec tickets,
Right.
fake websites. The bill addressed that. I believe the representative just did not mention that they're getting phone calls about the price. Now, we know what happens as the companies that are out there in plain sight, the marketplaces. We know what happens when a seller is told they cannot price the ticket at their own at the price that they're willing to accept. They do go elsewhere. They do go to social media. They do go to places like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Those are very popular here. They don't sell tickets to those websites. They don't specialize, verify. They don't provide order fulfillment. They don't have a call center for customer service. That's all that comes into the fees, and then they don't guarantee anything. That's all what comes in the fees when you buy tickets on one of our member marketplaces. It is nothing but a risk on social media. Those who have studied, those who are in financial crime have studied this.
Nothing but a risk.
In Ireland and Australia, in the state of Australia, what they found there was fraud did increase by 4x. That was causation. So ideally there'll be, preparation to deal with that. Having said that though, we believe 512 in its form, if we were to subtract the price cap, test it out as the way Maine has, and to have the same benefits that your venues are asking for. Because I think you stated it great, Madam Chair. You said, we're doing this for our venues, and we're doing this for our Vermonters. The thing that's changed monumentally since I was here at the end of last month is this verdict that just came out. Your state AG stayed the course, and I a lot of applause there. 34 state attorneys general. We were 3 days into that trial when the U.S. Department of Justice caved and allowed Live Nation Ticketmaster off the hook. Nearby, bless you, nearby over in Maine, Live Nation Ticketmaster has a very big footprint. What was left out of the discussion last week, I was hoping the question would come up. Great venue, great events that they host, zoomed in for you. That is a Ticketmaster ticketed venue. The large outdoor amphitheater that they spoke of is on the list of amphitheaters that the Department of Justice is requiring Live Nation to divest. It is Live Nation Ticketmaster. So Ticketmaster has been in this room, just in a veiled way. And I think,
Many are in this room and available.
I'm out there. I'm out there.
No,
It's
that's
public, you know, I am who I am. I represent the
We appreciate
ticketing
that.
companies. Happy to talk to you about that, but I think that invitation to come to Vermont should be, you know, an issue of pause and concern. We heard over the course of that brief trial just what Live Nation Ticketmaster is capable of doing to venues. They starve them of music concerts. They control, you know, how much they're paid, when they're paid. They control their ticketing, they control the artists, they control the promotions. That is not something I believe Vermont wants to have a welcome sign on the highway about. So we do have a suggestion of that. It's a pretty easy way to do this. It would deliver the solutions and address the concerns that your venues, your local venues, the Flynn and the Paramount testified about. And that would be to scope your bill to apply to small independent venues. I say that because other states, Connecticut is a good example of this, did use a cap. 3,500 was the number they came to, but they have transferability of tickets so that a small venue, a truly small, truly independent, not owned by an international conglomerate that has just been found guilty as a operating an illegal monopoly. We do not want to welcome that type of company into the state.
3,500 seats.
3,500 capacity. And we took a look at this again because we're in the ticketing business. You have a large or the largest independent, you know, venue would be 3,000. That is the Champlain Valley Expo. So whether it's the
Today.
Flynn,
We may.
We're working on a bigger one.
We're
and
working
you
on
are
it.
working on a bigger one. You are working on a bigger one, and you know, I hope championships come and the seats are filled and brings music too. But to the extent that we're talking about fake tickets, speculative tickets, there, you know, your venues have complained about tickets being resold at a higher price when they sell tickets. This bill is targeted and scoped to them to solve for their solution problems, while also safeguarding and future-proofing Vermont and what could be the Live Nation Ticketmaster entry point, because they already control 78% of large venues in the state of Maine. That's not the case here, but that's how it plays out. I would argue that
All
even the amended
venues in Maine
version,
are protected at the moment.
if this bill passes today, this is largely a welcome sign, a Christmas in April for Live Nation Ticketmaster, giving them a data point to say, Vermont just opened the door for us to come in and do what we've done elsewhere at a time where the state AG just stated out, you know, with the 33 other state AGs to reach this verdict could have potentially undermined what the AG office has accomplished in the Southern District of New York. Just pause and think about that. So there may be, number one, a way to go about this bill without the cap, come back in 2 years and see if it has accomplished the same positive outcomes that Maine has told you they had found.
Or with the cap and 10% is made. And many of our businesses would be thrilled to make 10%.
And I worry what would happen on Facebook Marketplace with that. There is a consequence. Not to mention, and I said this last time, but I'll repeat it again. We have there's no verification methodology. I'm happy, Madam Chair, you raised that earlier.
Actually, it's an amendment we're working on at the moment.
I would
But not
ask that
the
if-
price on the original.
So if the tickets are analog, because some venues do that, then it should be on the ticket. Most tickets, and if any of your local venues were contracting with a what I would say contemporary new option for helping to sell their tickets today, they would be digital as well. So that verification has to come in two forms: analog on the
Both
ticket, and
analog
digital.
and digital.
So it needs to be interoperability, because all we can do
Agreed.
is ask the senator if he was selling tickets, please promise us that you're comporting. I don't think a promise, you know, from a seller is what you're looking for. So, you know, we would love to work with you, you know, to improve this. I worry about, the consequence of fraud. As you heard from the AG's office would have difficulty enforcing this. We would have a difficulty enforcing it too, because there is no ability for us to verify the price of the ticket. If a seller tells us it was $1,000, we have to trust them.
That's why it's important to have the original price on the ticket, analog or
Digital, it'd have to be interoperability where there's back-end connections. So we can verify the ticket, was the actual ticket sold originally, and what that price was.
great. Thank you, Tom.
I'm trying, but I'm not following
Sure.
how Ticketmaster benefits from the price cap, and your advocacy for scoping to small venues for less than 3,000 people would to be only apply the price cap to those, and I don't see how that would all frustrate Ticketmaster's approach.
Great question. So, again, this was exposed. We've known this for a long time, but it was finally exposed to the public during the trial. So Ticketmaster, being the largest ticketer in the world, but also the US, Live Nation being the largest in terms of artists management, as well as promotions and tours, as well as venue management or venue ownership. They know when they throttle, put the thumb on their competitors. So in this case, our members would be capped, at what they can offer, including on the price. It's written so that it only applies to resale. It doesn't apply to the primary box office. Now, again, your current box offices today are operated by independent venues, but in the future, it could also have a little bit of Ticketmaster flavor in there. So they would be exempt and able to dynamically price their tickets. We see this
That's what
everywhere.
everywhere does.
Oh, absolutely. So depending on how many people are in the queue,
Right.
someone sent an image to me, speaking of photos of tickets the other day. I saw a photo from Ticketmaster queue. If you've ever purchased from them, you often get put into a queue. They were at number 508,000 in the queue. There isn't an event venue out there that can fit 508,000 people. So I think that individual was never going to get tickets. But when they see that type of demand, let's go ahead and adjust the price a little bit because the next person online has no idea what we just charged the last person. This is very, very common. And I think future proofing is important. So a price cap or price controls, remember the consumer at the end of the day, whether they're buying from the box office or if they're buying from one of our member marketplaces, they are just looking for tickets. I come at this from a consumer standpoint first. It's how I entered the industry. I was a fan of live music. I wanted my tickets and I wanted, the seats that I was looking for. Didn't so much matter whether it was the box office or if I was buying it on brianstickets.com. So from that perspective, if we exempt the box offices from that same rule that's intended to benefit consumers, you see where there's a vacancy there. There's a reason why Live Nation Ticketmaster is advocating for this very policy in other states, because they're exempt from it when they run the box office.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more question, because we have another witness or two.
Well, I mean, so I tried to go deep into this issue with Jay Wall at the Flip, and I don't want to mischaracterize. He just was willing
Sure.
to talk to me about, like, what has anyone done to get around Ticketmaster? And there's a whole case study out there about Broadway, and how Broadway essentially had to raise its seats to the price that they knew people would have otherwise paid to Ticketmaster or to some third party entity. And so I know most of our nonprofits would actually end up saying, well, it's hard because we're nonprofits. So if we have a row of $1,000 seats, that looks terrible. But I just sort of like to, I think the problem is a lot of these artists have contracts with Ticketmaster where Ticketmaster just absolutely owns whatever real profit margin could come from this.
But I'm not so worried about that at the moment. And, with this bill, I think I'm not as worried about that at the moment.
Okay, I mean, maybe this is to your point. I just want our box office. I mean, I think we need to look at the Broadway model. I don't know any other way.
The Broadway model is incredibly complex, and almost nobody buys tickets at face value because they're so marked down with groups and the KTS. And
So,
it
right.
is a
So then are we
complex
solving any
market.
problem?
Yeah,
Are we solving
it's a
any
very
problem?
I mean, there was, if you look back at the Save Our Stages Act that passed during the pandemic, I believe that Vermont venues were able to apply and benefit from that bailout when they had to close because of COVID-19. The federal Congress wrote, with the assistance of the National Independent Venues Association language, to make sure that it applied only to truly independent companies. Boy, the language to write that is about this long, but it was intentional. I spoke to them about this. It was intentional so that Live Nation's venues, that it's a public company, that they did not, or they could not, or they'd have a more difficult time getting their hands on those guns. So there is a definition out there. If you wanted to point certain solutions towards your Vermont venues that are truly independent, they are, to provide that solution to them, while still, even if you're not worried today, Chair, about that happening.
we should be, and that is partly why we have also
We shouldn't hand Ticketmaster a gift with this bill.
We're not.
So it is relevant.
Okay, I put a turn to Susan because we have 10 minutes left and we have a hard stop with Thomas.
Sure.
So, Brian, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would, Madam Chair, if I could just, because I saw the amendment just drop minutes before I came to the room, so I was trying to scan it. I think you mentioned 2 weeks. We'd love to continue to work with you on this.
We're going to get this bill out before May
Yeah, great.
8th, but that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to be working on it again next week as well.
Wonderful.
Because we need to I am hoping we're close to getting to yes, and we're gonna get there.
Got you.
Great.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
to help you in any way again.
Thank you very much. Susan, thank you for taking time for your holiday.
Thanks.
We welcome you and take us out on this.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry to not be there with you in person today. I'm Susan Evans McClure, the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. You have heard a lot on this topic, but really at the end of the day, this is not a complicated one. Scalping tickets is wrong, and it hurts Vermonters and Vermont businesses, and it should not be legal in our state. If you want to have the strong communities and local economies that I know we all want, Vermont needs to be a place that protects our small businesses and consumers. And over the past few weeks, you've heard directly from event venues about how this distorted market hurts the very event venues that drive our local economies. You've heard from Vermonters about how these predatory practices are taking money out of their wallets, delivering it directly out of state. And you've heard from international experts who told you how this problem has been successfully addressed around the world. And frankly, you've heard the lies and fear mongering from the giant corporations who are profiting off of greed and ticket scalping right here in Vermont. The question now is, whose perspectives are you going to centralize in your decision making? The hundreds of Vermont small businesses who signed a letter in support of H512 think it should be them. The hundreds of individual Vermonters who signed the same letter think it should be them. And the few giant predatory ticket resale companies that think they should be allowed to continue making money off of Vermonters, scalping tickets and making it even harder for our Vermont event venues to do business in our communities think it should be them. And when an out-of-state company spends unlimited money to defeat legislation that is widely supported by Vermonters, you have to ask yourself why that is. And in this case, it is because they are worried that basic consumer protections will not allow them to make money hand over fist from hardworking Vermonters. The ticket resale industry uses industry-funded studies that cherry pick their so-called data points to make their case, and their case is to continue making money off of Vermonters. We all agree that Live Nation and Ticketmaster is a monopoly, and now, luckily, a federal court has agreed to that too. But that is a totally different issue than the predatory ticket resellers. Two things can be really bad at the same time. It's also important to note that actually the Champlain Valley Expo grandstands can hold up to 10,000 spectators. So I know it was just proposed to add some sort of seat cap. If you were to go down that road, it would directly target the expo. And I don't think any of us want that. They're an independent nonprofit venue. What the ticket resellers here are suggesting is a total distraction from the reality that this can be a good news story. We have a proven way to stop this, and H512 is your chance to fix a broken system. And I'm speaking on behalf of the event venues and the fans here, but we do have major reservations about changing the definition of a reseller from a person to a business. Todd mentioned this earlier. And really, as we've demonstrated over the past few weeks, it is individual bad actors working through resale platforms who are profiting off of this and must be stopped. The amendment to exempt individuals on the House floor actually was not approved. And it's important to include here that nothing in this bill would stop individuals from reselling their tickets. In fact, this legislation would create a more transparent, fair, safe market for individuals to resell their tickets. When our Vermont venues have tracked down resellers, which they have done, they are always out-of-state individuals who purchase a ticket expressly for resale and then resell it for grossly inflated prices, taking money out of Vermonters' pockets. Senator Ram Hinsdale just brought up the example of fraud on social media, but what our venues are reporting are actually fans buying tickets through resale platforms from individuals. It is not tickets for sale on Front Porch Forum or Craigslist. In fact, I just searched on Vermont Craigslist now for tickets, and there is one ticket for sale, and it's at face value.
So sorry, I meant they're trying to purchase tickets probably for larger events outside of Vermont.
Oh, that might be totally true, but what we're focused on here is the Vermont venue. So that could be true if you're buying tickets to something in Boston or Montreal, but what we're seeing at our Vermont venues is not that.
Right, it happens more with the larger name.
Right.
Totally, exactly, which is why I think it's a great addition to keep this bill focused on Vermont venues. Earlier, you heard about laws in other states, and yes, we would be one of the first after Maine, but the other states that have passed ticket bills that do not include a price cap are now going back and demanding that the price cap be added. You heard from Maryland last week specifically that while their bill is good, it has not fixed the issue because it doesn't include a price cap. And frankly, I'm proud that Vermont is taking a stand on this to protect venues and consumers. The state of California is currently moving a bill through their legislature with a 10% price cap that actually includes an even more strict definition of a ticket reseller. The original definition in the House version of this bill provides a balanced approach that allows the Attorney General's office to successfully enforce the law. But I also know that the situation with resale scalping in Vermont is so dire that something is better than nothing. So we also support any compromise that it would take to move this forward, knowing that all processes here are iterative. Similarly, we're willing to accept the sunset provision because we know that these laws have been successful in other areas and that we can show that. I do have concerns if we weaken the definition of a reseller, the law will be harder to enforce. We may not be able to collect that data as quickly, but I just want to mention that when we're talking about a sunset. I feel like I've just repeated myself here about all the ways that Vermonters are wanting these common sense regulations. You know, free market capitalism kind of only works when the market is actually free. And right now, the ticket resale market is wildly distorted. What we're asking for is that Vermont align with the successful practices of countries around the world, and that Vermont takes strong steps to protect the things that make Vermont special. Our live events, our concerts, our sports, and the communities that come together around them. You all ran on making life more affordable for Vermonters. I know that's important to all of you. It's important to me. It's important to the artists and venues across our state. This bill is one way to do that. These common sense regulations are a way to do that. These protections for the things that people care about are a way to do that. Live event venues bring people together and create a deep sense of community. But when Vermonters can't afford it because of predatory markets, we all lose out. So on behalf of the venues and fans, music fans, sports fans, I'm really asking you today to choose everyday Vermonters over the greedy ticket scalpers who are profiting off of us. The many, many Vermont venues and fans who believe in this legislation are so grateful for the hard work you've done. And many of them have said to me, they're so impressed that people are, their elected officials are taking time to really understand this issue that's damaging them. So we appreciate the work you've done on this, and we appreciate your commitment to solving it. And we want to be a strong partner in making this work for Vermont venues and fans.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate so much, and particularly taking time from your holiday. Appreciate Brian coming back. Appreciate all of your time and everybody's focus on this. I think Thomas has a hard stop in a minute. We will continue work on this. I think I'd like to continue work on our language and clarify this. I think we're okay with the sunset is the sense I'm getting. And the cap, I had thought that was not in play, but I'm hoping it isn't in play. We will come back to this next week, but I really would like to get to yes on the main language and how we can make it work with what we have. So let's work on that in the interim if we could, and without driving a truck through that loophole. So I want to make sure that we can do that. Anything else? I think we would be happy to entertain, but I think at the moment we are done, and very grateful to everybody for their input. Thank you very much, and we will see you all tomorrow.